Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Unauthentic Leadership with the Colonel and the Coach. I'm Matt Smith, and Cam Ellsworth is your other host. And today we have some very special guests, Jeff Weed and Michelle Weed, who own and operate Tailwinds Ranch, who helps our military, our veterans, and first responders adjust to challenges in their lives. And we're going to get into that here in a second. And Jeff and Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt and Cam. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So just for context for our guests that are listening, Jeff and Michelle, longtime Air Force family. I call Jeff Bart. So if over the course of the next hour or so, I refer to him as Bart. That's just what I've known him as for the last 13 years. But me, Matt Smith, I've known Jeff and Michelle for a better part of 13 years. He was the commander of the Red Flag when I was out at Nellis as the 505th Test and Eval Group commander. We formed a professional relationship, then a personal friendship. And we've continued that for, the last decade plus. And just as we thought, as we were designing and building the Colonel and the Coach, we thought it was important that we don't just, work with people from a leadership perspective and help them as leaders in their units, their organizations, their teams and whatnot, but also it's reaching out to organizations that play an important role in the military, veterans, and then also from a mental health perspective in the sports world, because Cam and I both believe that mental health plays just as important part as physical health. And so we look forward to getting into those topics today. So again, Bart, Michelle, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Bart, Michelle, if you guys could just talk a little bit about your guys' mission down there in Williamsburg, Virginia, and perhaps even put it in the context of starting literally with loppers, cutting off leaves and bushes to literally create the ranch that you guys have built, and then just an opportunity to talk about the impact that you've had on, military veterans, their families, and potentially, some first responders that you guys had an opportunity to work with. Thank you.
So we are a therapy center, a nature-based therapy center in Williamsburg, Virginia. We specialize in PTSD and moral injury treatment and for first responders and veterans and active duty. I'm going to have Jeff talk a little bit about some of when we got started and how we grew.
So we moved here in 2018 after a long career in the Air Force. In a way, it was divine intervention to get us to where we were. And it was a challenge from the beginning to get this place going. We had to clear land, do some leveling. One of the great achievements of our life was in 2020, 2021 to get the grass to start growing. Changed us from a 10-month-a-year muck boot place to a 3-month-a-year muck boot.
All right, so he's minimizing this. So we moved in, this entire 8 acres was woods, thick woods,
Sure.
Except for where the house was. And we ended up here without a plan, right? We're trying to find where we wanted to actually retire. This was our 19th move after he was in for 28 years. And then we had moved once before after retirement, and then before we moved here. We came in here and started clearing the land, and we had hand loppers, and we would go out there and we could cut any tree that was below under 2 inches with hand loppers. We would be out there and we would be cutting an area because we had 2 horses that came with us, and they had to have an area cleared. And so we're out there clearing the land. And as we're doing this, we're also figuring out that Virginia has a very high clay soil. And when it gets wet, it will suck your boot off and you will leave your boots in the field. And so that's how we started.
So long process to get the place ready to go. And beginning of 2021, we got certified as a 501c3 nonprofit. Michelle could talk more about that because we don't typically charge our clients for the services they get here, and all the business licenses that we need and the certifications that we need to open up. And I think the first person that came out here was one of the people that needed Michelle's help the most. And the whole place really. I mean, so he needed a place to come to take his mind off of everything else that was going on in his life. And he'd been in one of our elite military organizations, the best of the best of the best, and had hit rock bottom in his life. One of the things that we made a decision early on is, and you probably know this pretty well, Matt, that there's a lot of times when people in the military end up in an admin discharge route before the service recognizes that some of the things that we've asked them to do were more than contributory, probably the key element that caused them to start, for example, self-medicating with alcohol or alcohol plus that led
Right.
to, and as such, sometimes those kind of people don't have a very clean DD-214 when they leave the service, and then it becomes harder and harder for them to get the help they need. And so very early on in this organization, we decided that we were going to do as much as we can as long as we can. And that included from the beginning helping some of the people that needed the most help, and frankly were having a hard time getting the help that they needed. And we made a decision at the beginning of this, if other people can't understand that, because, I mean, there's some organizations that check your DD-214 before they offer help. And we weren't going to do that because some of these people, men and women, needed as much as we could give them. And frankly, they needed Michelle to help lead them back to what you and I would call normality. And some of that is going back to work, actually having a relationship with their family, their friends, which was difficult before.
So let's go back a little bit, though, of how we got started would help as well, of like what we envisioned. Before he retired, we had thought about, I've been in equine-assisted services for over 25 years. And I'm working with veterans for about 15, 20 years. And we were seeing gaps in the programs that were out there. And one of the gaps was transition. So TAPS, the program you go through when you go to retirement, is great, but it doesn't talk about everything, right? It doesn't talk about the mental health aspects of transition. We originally started working with transition and then found another gap of how that the 2 years before and the 2 years after retirement or separation from the military, there is a much higher rate of PTSD and moral injury symptoms that come up. And people weren't getting the help that they need. They're busy trying to get on with their civilian life and not understanding why everything is falling apart. So we started developing this program to kind of fill those gaps, but we did it very organically. So we just kind of flowed with, like for here, we flowed with the lay of the land, and that's how we built. We would clear a little bit, figure out what the land looked like, we would build something. And it's the same with our mission. As we saw gaps, we figured out ways, how can we support that? How can we help fill that gap? And so that's kind of a little bit of how we got started there.
I wouldn't say almost all, but there's a significant number of people that have come out here that are in some type of transition in their life. Sometimes it's retirement. Sometimes it's an admin discharge. Sometimes it's their own decision to leave. But I'll give you a great, and this has a sports analogy too. Let's say that you're on the best team that you've ever been on in your life, and you are at the top of your game, and you can do anything that the military or the department or wherever you are asks you to do, certified in everything, proficient in everything, and all of a sudden you leave that for another job or transitioning out. And there's a lot of people who do not know how to deal with that huge difference in what has happened in their whole life, to include, what am I going to wear to work on Monday? Because they don't have that team support anymore. So we talk an awful lot about transitions. And as Michelle will say later when she starts talking about moral injury, is that no matter how good or bad your career was, when you go through these transitions, we all end up having what I call and what Michelle calls the low light reel, where you're lying there at night and you can't sleep, and you start, I don't know where it comes from sometimes, but you start going through in your own mind, if I'd only done this, or if I'd made this decision, or I'd been a better leader, then this wouldn't have happened. And you start dumping all of that stuff on yourself. With people that have seen serious combat, day-to-day life of a firefighter or policeman, people that are very well trained often don't exhibit the same symptoms as people with PTSD. PTSD is a fear-based response. I saw this, or
This happened
to me. Mm-hmm. But it becomes a fear-based response. For very highly trained people, it's starting to be recognized as moral injury, and it's a shame-based response. I should have shot that guy before he shot my buddy, or I shouldn't have shot that person, or this wouldn't have worked out that way. if I'd only opened that hatch, maybe somebody wouldn't have died. Or if I'd been a better firefighter on the scene, then this baby wouldn't have died. And so especially in transition, that low light reel happens where they're blaming themselves and sometimes not remembering things accurately anymore.
Right. There's a higher incidence of suicide attempt with moral injury as opposed to PTSD has a high rate of suicidal ideation. So thinking about it, but with moral injury, they're finding that it results in a higher actual attempts.
So, that's why, among the other things that, when we don't ask our patients, clients to pay, we ask them to, as much as they can, to volunteer in the community, the church. Sometimes they come out here and simply help with stalls or other things as we get going. And that gets them a little bit out of their own head and back into something more like a community relationship.
Well, I think that talking about our first client out here would be impactful. And it would also relate well with the sports and military angle of it. So we're still in the building of this. And if you saw the pictures, it was probably embarrassing to have anybody come out because it's panels everywhere that we still don't have fencing up, any wood fencing. We had some electrobraid and that type of thing. And there's mud everywhere. The grass isn't growing. But I had a client and could not get him out of bed. He was already hit rock bottom. He was not facing the world, and I was really worried about him. And so we still weren't fully open because we didn't have everything all set up. And so I said, listen, you need to get up out of bed and come out here, and you're going to work with us today. And so he ended up coming out here and working with us for the day. And we were building fences because we were just trying to do whatever it takes. Because once someone gets to that, they're teetering, you do whatever it takes. If it means you come out and you're doing some manual labor together, and that's a way to connect with others, a bonding. And so he ended up coming out. And so I'll let Jeff give you the rundown of that day because that was one of our most impactful ones. And 5 years, we are probably in monthly contact with them of just, check-ins of, hey, just letting you know what's going on in my life.
He was one of the first two people to also come back as a coach for us. So yeah, the fence story. So as anybody who's been married for a while, you might have a different way of doing things than your spouse. And
slightly.
I grew up in a engineering fighter pilot by the numbers. Michelle's much more a visual thinker, and we were in the middle of what I might describe as a marital discussion about how the fence building would happen when our now friend, at that time client, drives up. And I'd met him once before. When Michelle told me this, I thought maybe we'll put up 30 feet of fence and it'll be good. And so he gets out of the car and he looks at me and looks at Michelle and he goes, I don't know what's going on here, but if one of you has to go, it's going to be you because I need her. So then he and I just went off, building fences, and Michelle had to go. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, this is way too easy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Way too easy. And he goes, yeah, every time we put in a post or put up a rail, we're doing 10 push-ups and 20 squats. And we spent the rest of the day, we probably put up 140, maybe 150 feet of fences, 3 rail fences. And, I'm kind of a type A person and I wasn't going to quit, but he was like at least 10 years younger than me. And but it's one of those things where you never know what's going to happen. You never know what you're going to talk about. You never know sometimes the impact that you're going to have. It's overgeneralized, but for men specifically, a project or a task, or even trying to move 1,000-pound horse, leading them around, it's really hard for them to stay in the past or focused on something going on other than right now. And so it becomes a really good coaching therapeutic experience because you can end up talking about anything as you're doing work, or you're working with the horses or just trying to lead a horse around. So when that all happened, Michelle and I started to realize that this amorphous idea that we're going to open up a center was going to now be focused on PTSD, moral injury, and hopefully some work in the community to get people back to what I would call normal. And a lot of them, especially the first 2 years, a lot of people were on the backside or inpatient alcohol therapy for the most part. It's good to watch them walk their way through that.
I will add, he was one of the things that came out of that as well is we knew that the coaches would be important, because the difference between coaching and therapy is coaches can address things from today forward. Like, okay, now you have this new information, you have these new resources, coping skills. What are you going to do with them? How are you going to implement these in your life? What kind of plan are you going to be doing for the next 2 years? That type of thing. Therapy goes back. We go forward as well, but we can go from today back and go, okay, what is the root of this problem? What is that issue? So we found this rhythm that worked. We ended up at one point having about 4 coaches, and I would work one-on-one with the client, doing EMDR and other exposure-based type of therapies or adaptive disclosure for moral injury and developing that. So I would work intensely one-on-one with them for an hour to 2 hours. And then I would hand them off to the coaches, and they would work with them with the horses, or sometimes they would just be out there having a discussion, and they can work on those things from today forward as a peer, as a connection. Like Jeff is still connected to the first guy who came out here. It is still, they study different books together. And, when one of them's going through a tough time, or anybody in the group is, they'll pick a book to read together, things like that, where there's a connection. There's something to hold on to. When we're in the middle of PTSD and moral injury symptoms, it doesn't feel like we have anything to hold on to. I think it was Michelle DeMarco that talks about, you're trying to hold on to air. You're just trying to grab on to something and there's nothing there. You don't feel like you're tethered to anything. And so giving them the veteran peer support allows some type of connection that is authentic and something to hold on to.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things that I think in the way that our program is structured that allows some of that to happen fairly organically. Now, Michelle will talk about the counseling sessions. They're not your standard 53 minutes and out type of counseling sessions. It's fairly intense. Not fairly intense. It is intense.
They call this the cry room. This is my office in the barn.
Seen her make grown men cry. So it's really interesting when you see people come in at first and some of them aren't even making eye contact with you and can't put out their hand to shake your hand really. And by the end of this, both physically and mentally and spiritually, they just seem so much better at the end of their time with us.
So, just from a beginning standpoint, how many people do you serve? Is it men and women? Are they living there? Are they living close? Could you just maybe talk a little bit more about the setup in your area? And again, just maybe start from there.
Okay. So we see men and women. They come from anywhere. If they have a regular weekly or every other week sessions. So our goal, let me back up a second. Our goal is 6 to 12 sessions to begin with. And those sessions are usually an hour to 3 hours, depending on what we're working on. And people come anywhere from North Carolina. We have clients that come from DC and drive down. We also have people that fly in for a couple of days. So if they come in from out of town, they stay in town. That's all on their own. They have to bring a support system with them, one person to stay with them at the hotel, because I don't like to have them go back on their own. If they fly in, usually we are doing about 15 hours of counseling over 3 days. The research has shown that the intensive model can work really well, and our outcome measurements have shown that as well. Other people, for our local ones, they come in every other week. It's the easiest way for us to be able to get the number of clients in that are asking to come in is to do a couple hour sessions every other week. So they flip. And everybody is shift workers pretty much. And so we have to look at, okay, when's your next day off? When can you come in? That type of thing. So that's an ever-changing schedule. So our goal is 6 to 12 sessions. And we do measurement scores of a PCL5, which it's a measurement assessment that shows the PTSD symptoms affecting daily functioning. So the scale is 0 to 80. At 33, we are seeing PTSD symptoms affecting functioning, and we will have people come in the 70s. They aren't functioning. They're on the brink of divorce. They're not doing well at work. At work, they might be the ones that are always late to the meetings, or in the first responder world, they may be the ones that are last to arrive at the scene, right? Because they're avoiding those type of things. Because they're just trying to hold things together. Our goal is to get them below 33. Surprisingly, we have some good graphs up on the website with the different ways that we approach this. We're able to get most people down below 33 and sometimes down into the teens. With that, we wait for a little while. We continue, like we say, 6 to 12 sessions. But one of the reasons we do that is because when somebody coming in here and they're thinking, I don't have 2 years to do therapy every week. I don't. I can't fit it into my schedule. How am I going to tell my work that I have to be out of work every Wednesday? And so 6 to 12 sessions is approachable. I can do 6 to 12 sessions. And then if I'm done and we've got the symptoms under control, then great. They can come in anytime for a tune-up. All they have to do is just text me and I get them in within the week, and we do a couple-hour tune-up with some EMDR and all, and off they go. So that's kind of our model. And did I catch all of that you had asked?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I've never heard the moral injury, like that, the reference. I just wondering if there's people that transition or that have PTSD that then maybe self-sabotage that leads to moral injury. Is that something you see commonly? Because in my head, some of it makes more sense, right? And what you're talking about with the suicide rates and the way that the moral injury is causing higher, do you guys see that transition? And so maybe that getting people below the 33 is not only helping them in the short term, but that long term from transitioning out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so here's the thing with that is that the reason that it comes up the most in the last 2 years of military career and the first 2 years after is because up until then, you're usually in a job that is intense. Your adrenaline is gone, you got to get ready for the next deployment. You have this next training, you have to get ready for this next board, a promotion board, what have you. Last 2 years, things start to slow down. Sometimes you're in that step off job, right? And what happens is we apply meaning in retrospect. When we are having an experience, our brain isn't going, oh, this is what this means to me. It's afterwards that we do a reappraisal of the event and figure out what the meaning is to us. So what happens in that slowdown period is all of a sudden you've got room to think, right? And so now all of a sudden we're going to revisit all of these memories that have just been kind of like tickling the back of your brain, or you've had it compartmentalized in these boxes in your brain. And now you're going to, reevaluate, did I do a decent job with that? Was this my fault? Should I have done something different? And those are the things that just increase the shame and guilt that is part of moral injury. And I think that is one of the big things to understand is that the PTSD is in the DSM-5. So that's our diagnosis manual for mental health disorders, right? And so with that, there's evidence-based therapies of how to approach it. It's mainly exposure-based, I should say, because they have expanded a little bit. And that means like EMDR, prolonged exposure, that type of things for exposure to desensitize to the event. What that is a traumatic experience is in the amygdala and the hippocampus in the brain. And the amygdala is your alarm system in the brain. So every experience you have in your life goes through the amygdala, and the amygdala goes, hey, are we okay? It checks in with your hippocampus, which is your like episodic memories. It's your Google search engine of memories. So driving into work today, your amygdala would have gone off and said, hey, are we okay? And it would be like, yeah, we're going into work. We've driven this, 500 times, So the memory of that goes up into the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't come up as an intrusive thought, nothing like that, right? In a traumatic event, it comes in through the amygdala. The amygdala goes, hey, are we okay? Checks in with the hippocampus. The hippocampus is like, no, we're not. I don't know what's going on. Send off the alarm. So it goes up, and the amygdala then does the fight or flight or freeze response. And it keeps checking in with the hippocampus going, are we okay yet? Right? So now, and this is a way to conceptualize what's going on in the brain for people, because it gives them a better idea of why it is that we do the approach we do for PTSD. In that amygdala and hippocampus looping, that looping in PTSD doesn't stop. So you're at a slow burn of a fight or flight or freeze response for years and sometimes decades. We have had even a Korean War veteran come in that it was still looping and had not been functioning and finally came in for treatment. And so if you think about that and how much cognitive energy is taken by that amygdala and hippocampus looping, right? You're quick to respond, you're quick to anger, irritable, hypervigilant. You're not looking around going, wow, I want to see what is beautiful and wonderful in the world. We're looking around and going, what are my danger cues in my environment?
I mean, here's a good example is, let's say that you were deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, and several incidents always happen on dirt roads that made a certain sound every time you went down the dirt road. Come back home and you're driving down this dirt road, rocks flying up, and your brain's going, are we safe? No. Are we safe? No. Are we safe? No. And most of the time the person doesn't really figure out that it's the road, but they are hypervigilant.
Agitated.
Their focal point goes from, instead of seeing the world down, squeezes in like this, they get agitated with their family, who maybe don't understand that they're even agitated to begin with. And it can end up in situations where, for unknown reasons, you stop driving down dirt roads. And if you're working on a dirt road,
or you live on
or
one,
you live on a dirt road, you're in the middle of that PTSD freeze or flight type of response all the time. And obviously, the person may not know, but the rest of their work colleagues may not know, but they're there.
So then moral injury, when we do the exposure therapies, is we have to desensitize to those triggers. And there's a whole way of doing that. And I usually use eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's one of the VA approved models for PTSD. And what happens is it takes some of the information out of that amygdala hippocampus looping and puts it away where it needs to go up into the prefrontal cortex, and just as a stored memory, not as an activating memory. And so that is more of, when you say it's a fear-based, it's an old fear, because people, they get uncomfortable with that thought of like, I'm not walking around afraid of things. And they're not. This was an old traumatic experience that the body and brain thinks is still ongoing. Okay. And that's what we have to get the body and brain to go, no, it's over. And we can put it away. It doesn't protect you now to have that fight or flight or freeze response going. Okay. So our goal with PTSD treatment is we can't change that event, but we're trying to change the emotional and physiologic response to the event so that it informs your life and doesn't drive it. When you are unaware of where this agitation is coming from, this hypervigilance, these negative feelings are coming from, it's driving your life. When you're angry and you don't know why, and you're snapping at everybody at home, it's driving your behaviors. So we want to get to the point of where they go, all right, I know what's going on right now. It was the dirt road today. Okay, it's cool. I'm safe now. All right, moving on type thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Kim and I stood up the business because we want people to be their authentic selves. You guys want people to be their authentic selves so you can get to the point in therapy where you're making that connection, whether it's PTSD therapy, moral injury therapy, making that connection so that you can get to steps in the processes. A lot of folks you guys work with, every job that of the folks that you're working with, probably it's an exceptionally high adrenaline type thing. A first responder, a police officer, a firefighter, perhaps even special forces guys, fighter pilots, or just operators that are used to that thrill, that rush. And there's a certain sort of like, I don't want to go ask for help because I'm supposed to suck it up. I'm supposed to be tough and I'm supposed to figure everything out myself and whatnot. Yet when you break your arm or you break your leg or you get injured or you need stitches, you go to the doctor, right? For that physical injury. And obviously there's the mental aspect to it. And And can you just talk a little bit about and just that aspect of things, the mental aspect of things, and how you would recommend to someone who maybe knows that they want to work with Tailwinds Ranch or something that's like Tailwinds Ranch, and they want to get, they want to work with Bart and make fences, and they want to work with Michelle and receive, therapy. They want to do those 6 to 12 sessions, or at least the first session of the 6 of the 12. Can you talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind? Can you provide an example of a moral injury without mentioning someone's name or specific career field or anything like that?
Yeah. So if you think about trauma, the PTSD is what happened to you. Moral injury is what you did or you didn't do, or betrayal by leadership. So a trauma is something, a threat to life, limb. It can be towards yourself. You witnessed it. You were part of it, or it can be a close family member. Moral injury is something that goes against your moral code. And it's something that you did, something that went against, went beyond the rules of engagement.
Okay.
Something that you failed to stop. It's the somebody else goes beyond the rules of engagement and what we call the berserk mode of moral injury, or betrayal by leadership, betrayal by someone in authority. So in a high stakes environment, all right, we're not talking about a little disappointment. We're talking about a high stakes environment. So the origination of this was Jonathan Shea was a therapist. I think he was a psychiatrist, if I remember correctly. Dr. Shea was at the VA back in the 80s and these 90s, I think. And he was finding, like, why aren't some of these veterans getting any better? They're getting worse on this exposure therapy. What is going on? And he figured out that the exposure therapy was making this shame and guilt worse. So exposure therapy is, hey, look at this, look at this. We're going to look at it again and again and again, and we're going to approach it in all different ways until we're desensitized to that, right? Now you take something that is guilt or shame, not fear-based, guilt or shame of, I did something bad, I'm a monster. Some guys come in here and that's what the first thing they say to me is, I'm a monster. I'm going to taint others. I'm going to taint, my family. And so you take something like that and you have them look at it again and again and again, and during EMDR or something like that, that is not going to then desensitize them to that. It's going to exacerbate it, that feeling. So research over the course of the last about 10, 15 years has really expanded on it. And one of the things that they found was that when they did a functional MRI of somebody with PTSD, it lights up in the amygdala and hippocampus. When they do it with somebody with moral injury, it lights up in the prefrontal cortex. So it is something that went through the amygdala hippocampus, it gets put away, and then the brain goes, oh, no, unacceptable. That I'm a monster. There's no way I could have done that, or that they did that, or I didn't stop that.
I got a movie example of, I'm not saying that anybody involved in this movie had a moral injury, but it's a good example. So there's a scene in, I think it's Lone Survivor, where a teen gets exposed and found on a sensitive site exploitation by some kids, and are then faced with the decision, do I protect my mission and my team by shooting those kids, or do I let the kids go and then potentially sacrifice my team? There's no right answer to that question. And it's a judgment that happens in the moment based on a whole bunch of other contexts that are around you. But in retrospect, somebody who has been through it, an example like that or a situation like that, tends to now take it upon themselves. Should have done this, could have done that. We call it the woulda, coulda, shouldas. And it becomes that low light reel that can then spiral into potentially morally injurious event, depending on how they deal with it, either right away or don't deal with it, and it comes back comes back later in their transition at some other point.
I think part of your question was like the different people that we work with. We work with a lot of special ops, all different branches. We work with a lot of intel. You got to think about the responsibility of, both of those groups of, who takes the fall if it's bad intel, right? Even UAV personnel, they're watching these clips. Intel are watching these clips again and again. They're watching this live action again and again and analyzing it. Things like that get into that moral injury piece, right? We work with pilots, quite a few pilots, a lot of people from the ships, OD, kind of across the board. One of the reasons that many of them feel comfortable coming here, we average about 60 to 65 clients a year come through our organization. And one of the reasons that they feel comfortable here is we don't take insurance. So no diagnosis goes in their chart. When you take insurance, you have to do a diagnosis in the first session. And so their information stays here. It doesn't go anywhere unless they ask for it to go somewhere. If they want, like they want to do a claim with the VA later on or something like that, they fill out the paperwork. But that's one of the ways that we have hopefully opened up, getting mental health, where they're not going into a clinical office and sitting across from somebody and going, how do you feel about that? I'm kind of not a nice counselor. And that usually resonates with most of these people, our people. And because they're intense, I'm intense. It's like, okay, cool. I got somebody I can talk to. We use a different technique, and we use adaptive disclosure, but we have adaptive disclosure, and we call it forces seen and unseen, and I've had some really great outcomes from it.
I wondered also like how much referral / empowering those around them. So that person comes to you, has success, and then not only keeps that in their world, but then tells their friend, hey, you used to be, or I used to be you. In the military world, it's a small world. And what you guys do, it's amazing that I get to be in on these conversations. But yeah, a couple of years ago, I was going through a lot of weird, and nothing for any of the reasons of any of these people. And I went and I sat with Matt, and I asked him to sit down, and I'm like, dude, I'm out of there, Matt. I don't know if remember is in your backyard. I was talking Michelle about the 6 to 12 sessions I started. Number one, it was impossible to find someone to talk to. And then the first time I did, I was more angry and frustrated. There was no listening. Then I found a situation that was phenomenal. And the funny part about it was, like, partway through, I got into it, and we were going through lessons and things. And I'm like, I stopped it. I'm like, hey, do I have to slow this down? Because I don't want to stop talking to you. And so you talk about the 6 to 12 or the 2 years, and it's still something. Now it's not as intensive. It used to be every week. Now it's every other, and it goes on. And then why I ask the referral thing is that, again, different world. But when I explain as the leader of the men's hockey team that I've sought this, it's amazing to see other people let their guard down. And now you can have that conversation. And I do believe that while I was ready to listen, maybe at other times in my life, I didn't understand as well, just because of my own experiences. But having, being the leader of 30 men, we've had conversations, we've had people share, we've had people get uncomfortable. And then seeing the backside of like how good that is, and just sharing it. And then the empathy and the ability for others to help them. I mean, it's just been a really good thing. But again, I just wonder if, I'm sure you see that, right, in your area, just that one person brings the next. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. We don't advertise at all. And we get requests weekly, and it's referral based now. People, and it has been almost from the get-go of someone comes through here, they reach out to their friends, they go to a reunion, they tell that the guys at their reunion that, hey, I finally addressed my PTSD. This is what was going on, guys. I was drinking. I was, life was bottoming out, and they'll talk about it with them. So absolutely, we get it from veterans and the first responders. I usually will get a text that says, hey, so-and-so told me to reach out to you. And for me, that helps because we work intensively. Having it be referral from somebody else that knows that person and knows that they are motivated, because you've got to be motivated to work on this, right? And so it's not just finding somebody on a Google search, and it's hey, this person might be the one that can help you. When you talked about your first experience, was not good, right? You have to shop around for counselors. We always think, okay, we have this one referral. I finally got into this counselor. I don't get along with them. I don't like them. I remember I had a counseling session. I ended up doing EMDR on the therapist, and then she charged me.
Our population that makes Michelle very effective is the amount of acronyms and lingo that gets used. She doesn't have to stop and go, can you tell me what that means? Can you tell me what that means? Can you tell me what that means? So they end up speaking naturally. And just because she was in the Air Force the entire time with me, and so she knows how we talk, that's why she's such a good counselor.
Around fighter pilots for 28 years,
Right.
when he was, so yeah.
Right. So, and likewise, I mean, she's had enough involvement with the fire departments and police departments now. It works the same way, so that they can just speak naturally. She understands what they're talking about and can help them put context to what they're feeling. And so she's had some great support from some great local chiefs, and then the military, basically the counselors in the military bases around here know who she is, and then everything else is word of mouth and a lot of referrals. So it works for us. It makes fundraising a little difficult, but it works for us.
How do you guys maintain your own balance? Like, in other words, like, you guys are onboarding a lot of stuff, and I know, Michelle, you're professionally trained, and I would argue that Bart's professionally trained as well, either by proxy or through his years in the military and having been a commander at multiple levels, multiple times, all that sort of stuff. But can you just talk to that? Because I think that if I was listening to this podcast, I'd be like, holy crap, you guys are onboarding a lot of emotions and just a lot of challenges and helping people navigate that. Just doing the math, I mean, you guys have affected so many people and so many families. Can you just real briefly talk to that piece, if you don't mind?
It's a tough one. One of our things is it's hard to say no to people. So I always say, okay, I'm gonna manage my schedule better, and then I get somebody calling or texting that's in crisis, and I'm like, I've got time later to work to have me use some coping skills. I'm going to work with this person, and that's kind of who we are, and I'm okay with that. But finding that balance is a daily work, and checking in with each other. And when one of us gets edgy, we have had to have the discussion of, okay, we can verbalize to each other, hey, you're edgy, you got some aura going on here, though he will dispute that there's auras with anybody, but I will say that there is, because he usually, when he's edgy, it's there. So we try to have that open communication. We don't always do it. We're a regular married couple of we're yelling at each other and going, wait, hold it, what's actually going on, because we're not really upset about this. We just need to regroup and do some coping.
When people ask me this question, Matt, I always bring up the movie. There's the guy in the Green Mile, absorbs all the illness and the badness, and then when he lets it go, all these bugs fly out of his mouth. I can tell when Michelle needs to let it go. She very rarely talks to me about anything, but when she does, it's important. I mean, clinical stuff, but it's important for her to get it out, physically, mentally, emotionally, because she's holding on to a lot of stuff. One of the things as a counselor, especially when you hear some pretty incredible stories, and some stories that are sometimes difficult to hear, you cannot react to that. The last thing you want is your counselor to make some kind of face, or especially, as she said earlier, and some people come in and they start with, I'm a monster, and I'll tell you why.
That goes on the moral injury piece, right? I do want to say that. It's like, sometimes they'll come in and they'll tell me something really bad, should I say? And because what they're looking for is validation that I'm a monster, right? They're walking in going, I'm a monster. I'm going to say something that is going to validate that negative feeling of self. And so when I'm sitting there going, okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's see what else was going on. And because when you have trauma, your world goes like this, and you're looking through, a soda straw. We have to expand out the context and see what else was going on at the time and things like that. So a lot of times it's not that I'm suppressing a judgment, because it's not there. It's seriously not there. But one of the nice things for me is that the coaches end up, a lot of times people are telling them about some of their traumas when they're out there working, right? And they're not processing it. All they're doing is going, okay, well, what are we going to do in the future? After, at the end of the day, when we have coaches that are on site, at the end of the day, we have a debrief, and everybody can sit down and talk of, okay, anything come up for you? Did anything get triggered of your own traumas? Things like that, so that no volunteer here who works with intense stuff, including me, leaves with their own traumas triggered.
When we know that this is going to be part of the day, we have a quick brief in the beginning to go, okay, to remind you, this is this person, this is what I want them to work on. Yeah. And then,
which might be like a emotional regulation, not projecting their own feelings onto everybody else, but recognizing when they're doing that, things like that, that the coaches can help with working with the horses.
I think the debrief, just like any place else, is more important than the briefing. And the briefing is setting the stage. The debriefing lets us cross flow communications of what we thought worked, what didn't work. And I'll be honest, frankly, some of the times there's an aha moment in there, because they'll bring something up with a coach that Michelle's like, I've been trying to get them to talk about this, work on this particular thing. So that's good. Or they're avoiding talking about this particular thing. And then I think the kind of the self-assessment of everybody else there. And I've seen Michelle take one of our or two of our coaches over time for another hour after that the sessions are in, so that they don't walk out with something that has bothered them to the point where they need to talk about it.
You get triggered not by stuff that is always direct, right? And it can be something that hits a little part of it, or makes you have that physiologic same feeling that occurred at that time. And that's what activates you. And so when we do the debrief, we're able to kind of dig into our own stuff. That's what the debrief is about, is like, hey, did anybody's own stuff come up that they want to talk about, and leave here? Don't take it home. Things like that.
Even before the clients leave, when we're doing that kind of situation, she basically gives them an opportunity to give, one good thing that happened today, or one, what did you like about today? What do you think could have gone better? And it's very telling a lot of times. You can see what's going on in their head and where they are in their own personal transition.
Could I ask, is there anything like the regular Joe that just wants to help the people around them that you would recommend? Again, if that's somebody in your care, if that's somebody around you, whether that's family, whether that's employee, whether that's employer, whether that's teammate, with what I understand is a shortage of help, an abundance of problem. How can we help each other, or how would you recommend that we help each other?
Oh, that's a great question. It's holding space for the other person. Right? So holding space means that I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm just going to sit in the suck with you. That's it. Because you're in a sucky place. I'm just going to sit next to you and go, wow, yeah, this sucks. What do you, I'm just going to, whatever you need. Right? So that would be one thing. Secondly, then find the resources around you. There's like psychologytoday.com has search engine that has, like, you can put in what type of treatment you're looking for and what your insurance is, and it'll pop up anybody in your area that has openings, things like that. I think probably the biggest thing for PTSD and moral injury, and let me have it less pathology and just say trauma response, or moral injury type thing, moral distress, is we lose our sense of meaning. We lose our sense of purpose. And so helping others find a sense of purpose, like for you as a coach, do you need any help doing something? Or, a kids team in the area that is looking for volunteer coaches and stuff, or needs uniforms made or whatever, that you can help somebody find something good to do that can help start rebuilding their moral sense of self.
Yeah. From my perspective, which is a total layman's and former military commander's perspective, one of the things that I like to say to people is that how do you even recognize that there's a problem? Because if if the first time you met somebody, they were already having this problem or a problem like it, then it might be hard to even diagnose to yourself that there is a problem. But there's this normal standard of behavior that you as a leader see every single day. And one of the first things in my mind, and this is definitely a military thing, is when something starts going wrong, people's communication skills immediately suffer. Like when you're flying fighters, you say Viper check 234, and when somebody misses a check-in like that, it's an abnormal situation, and it's something that would get debriefed if it goes on and on and on. Well, you get in a workplace or on a hockey team, baseball team, communication skills are absolutely required to get complex tasks done. And when somebody starts having problems, it often manifests itself as a communication skills problem. They're not doing what they normally once would do. They're not. They're isolating themselves more than they otherwise would. I once saw two guys who were best friends in a debrief, almost to the point of fisticuffs, and it turns out that one of the two of them was about to have a huge major life change, and it manifested itself in the debrief with two guys who were really good friends almost coming to blows, which is a great example of you know that something is wrong, but you're not really sure what it is. And so the only thing that can kind of straighten that out is if somebody has what I would call the fortitude to put their fingers uncomfortably into somebody else's life and sit them down in a quiet place and go, hey, what's going on? Because this is what I'm seeing. And sometimes that push is all it takes to get somebody outside of that bubble of isolation and realize maybe that they need to talk to somebody. And then your example of, hey, I've been in this situation before, and you may think that this is the stupidest thing in the world to go talk to somebody about this, but I know it works, and it's worth a shot. In the long run, it's worth a shot. If it's the one thing that it takes to somebody to get help to not really end up hurting themselves, it's worth saying. I had a boss once who said to me that before somebody goes and flies an airplane, if you say something one time in your entire career that saves one person or one airplane, it was worth saying to them. So you may think that you're saying the same thing over and over and over again, but it may impact that person in a very profound way. But that just requires you to be consistent and observant and say the thing that needs to be said.
Thank you.
We haven't talked a lot about the horses, and I know the horses are probably getting hungry, but can you just talk about what that means to your mission in Tailwinds Ranch, and then how you use the horses to accomplish that mission? And then if there's anything that you would want someone who's listening to know about why equine therapy or just the use of horses is just important, either in therapy or just in one's life.
Movement is really important in trauma therapy. Trauma is locked in the body. The memory of the trauma is in the body. And so thinking it through and releasing it doesn't work quite as well as being able to activate the body as well while you're processing traumas. And so we have, we work in the clinical office, and then we do a different kind of equine-assisted therapy. So I've worked at ones all over the world, and different ones do it different ways. In some places, it's like all the interaction should be with the horses, and ours is not like that at all. It's kind of, we are a trauma center first that happens to have horses and utilize horses in some of the sessions. It's a grounding, the being able to care for another. Sometimes we are in here processing and then we end the session because one of the horses needs a bandage. They cut themselves or something. Sometimes it's the early morning session. A lot of times they're helping me put the horses out. The evening one, last of the evening, they're helping me bring the horses in. It's that connection and caring for others. The other part of that is that sometimes when things are hard to say, I feel a certain way, we can go out to the horses, because if when I say clinical office, it can be in here in the office, or we have a number of porches and we're out in the field and all of that. But we can be out in the field, and we're watching the horses or something, and one of the horses kind of goes over and nudges the other one away, right, from the good hay. It's very interesting to me because I can ask somebody, well, what do you think just happened there? And I'm thinking in my mind, well, he just nudged the horse away from the good hay. He wanted the good hay. And they may say something completely 180 out. And that might be, he's a bully, he's abusive, that never lets the other horse get, anything good. And these are things that we project, right? It's feelings we might have in our own families or our own relationships. So giving you an idea of EMDR. EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So we use bilateral stimulation, both sides of the body, during processing to stimulate the processing. I mean, there's a whole long explanation for that, but
Let me just interject and say it sounds like some kind of woo-woo new age thing. But I've heard a couple of her patients, and I'll come back to a different story. But they brought people from their unit here. This was their brief to their buddies. You're not going to believe this works, but just do exactly what she has you do, and you're going to feel better by the time that you leave. Michelle said the bilateral movement that helps you reprocess the way you even think about specific events or things that happen in your life.
So one of the ways, it's usually done in an office. It can be the eye movements like this that you've probably seen in movies and things like that. It can be tappers that tap back and forth when they hold in the hands. Sometimes that they cannot tolerate that. If they have a history of headaches and I'm doing eye movements, that can cause some more headaches. If they were a gunner and now they have tappers in their hands that are going zzz, 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 that brings back, a whole nother load of memories, right? And so with equine-assisted EMDR, we're out in the field. They are putting their hands on the horse, and I'm doing back taps for their bilateral stimulation, right? So they have the support of the horse in front of them. So the warmth of the horse, the support of the horse. There's also an element of danger, right? And working around horses, there's an element of danger. So being able to dissociate into a flashback decreases, right? I don't want to go into a flashback when I have to worry I'm going to get stepped on or something with the horse, right? So you have that going on. And then very interesting part of it is, and this is going to sound really woo-woo, and I would totally have agreed, and I thought the same thing before I started, is that I cannot tell you the number of times that when we're processing a major trauma with the horse, all the horse is doing is just standing there. They have their hands on the horse. The horse's breathing and the client's breathing starts matching, which is co-regulation. The horse can help regulate we can do that to each other too, right? If we slow down our speech, we slow down our breathing and stuff around somebody that's a little agitated, it can help bring them down. It's the same type of thing, but they're taking it on as well.
When Michelle's doing that, she has a coach, occasionally somebody with a little more than a coach, holding the horse and just making sure that her focus is on the client and my focus is on the horse to make sure that the horse is doing stuff safely. And she has, in this case, it was a Marine working through an intense situation. And he is in the middle of what you and I would call a full flashback. He is hyperventilating. He can't really see me. I'm on the other side of the horse and just holding him and trying to be as quiet and small as possible as Michelle's working through this intense trauma. And the horse, call sign Bob, starts breathing exactly like this client. He is fully in, out, as close to hyperventilating as I've ever seen a horse do. And then I hear on the other side, Michelle work through it, and I hear this Marine blows out all the air, and then the horse does exactly the same thing. I'm like, is anybody else seeing this? Because I've seen this particular horse do that at least twice during these sessions now, and it's very powerful to watch, but it's also very powerfully effective with the guy who needed it at the time.
And not everybody does it. Probably, less than 50% of our clients will do the equine-assisted EMDR or anything. We match the therapy to each individual client that comes out. And so I have some clients that I always like it. I have some clients where I have to look down at their feet see what kind of shoes they have on, because that's going to tell me whether they want to be around the horses. And I swear, I have one, I swear she puts on high heels right before she gets out of the car. Because I'm like, that doesn't quite match your outfit, but I think you don't want to work with the horses. And she said, nope, I'm not touching them. I'm like, that's cool. And so we try to match it for everybody. It's one of those things that I wish you could experience, because talking about it doesn't do it justice, and it does sound woo woo, and it sounds like, seriously, and it's a hard thing to explain in a quick discussion. But
I also think that at some level, it's a lot easier to say, hey, I'm going out to the ranch versus I'm going to get therapy, although it's not every client, but it's an important part of what we do, especially getting people to work through things.
And can I say this too with the horses, is having a connection when I say we work with pretty severe PTSD and moral injury, many times it's people that have not been diagnosed with that. So it's not like they know what they're coming in with, right? But we work with some pretty, a lot of suicidality. We've had to get people into the emergency room from suicidal ideation, things like that. And so they isolate, when we feel like we're going to taint others, we isolate more and more. When we are avoiding people, places, and thoughts with PTSD, we isolate and use substances and things like that to numb it, right? So after all that isolation, they start being able to connect with a horse. There have been a number of times that I've got late night text or email saying, hey, can you just send me a picture of my horse? Because they're teetering, and not enough to get into the ER, but they're teetering enough that I just need something I can hold on to as a reminder. So
yeah, we had a guy come back after 2 years, which, here's another thing, is that, as Michelle gets them through this program, they don't need to come out as consistently, but she's always available for check-ins when things go bad. And he was gone for 2 years, and he came out to visit us. And we're like, I see his car, but where is he? And we come out to the barn, and he's in the stall with his horse.
he hadn't even made it to the office yet, and we're like, what?
Right.
And a lot of times our coaches and our previous clients will remind us that the more, and people will probably not like that I say this, but the more structured, sometimes the less they get. So the more organic that we have as a program, the more that in their interactions with the horses and stuff like that, the more that they are receiving from it.
Can you guys, obviously what you do is not free, right? Like horses cost money to have a ranch and to provide the therapy services you guys provide, and it's probably expensive. And if there's someone out there that's listening to this that says, wow, like maybe I don't necessarily need the services that they provide because I don't have the level of PTSD or moral injury in my life that these people do. However, I believe in the mission. I believe in the people that conducted the mission to support the defense of our nation, to them and to what they did. Can you talk about, if someone wants to help, someone wants to maybe provide some resources, how do they go about doing that? And is there anything in particular that you're looking for that says, what we really need is this? Can you talk to that?
So we have a shoestring budget. So we average about $38,000 a year to run the program, because the nonprofit only pays for the horse care and feed. Yet we have we have some staff, but it's minimal. We have a 1099 that's in 2 mornings a week to help with the horses, and insurance and all that kind of stuff. Anything that is a tangible, like a fence post or anything else like that, it's Jeff and I buy that. So the nonprofit is only clinically based things. And so as much as I hate to say, we could use funding. When you asked about how do you guys keep the balance, when we only have paid help 2 mornings a week, other than that, it's just us, And so
Very dedicated volunteers.
we have some amazing volunteers. Keep the volunteer staff very small because of what we work with, right? With the trauma and things like that. We don't do a big volunteer pool. We only have 1 or 2 volunteers out here at a time. So funding is really important because right now we do need some extra help in the barn. We would like to be able to bring in another therapist because right now we're down to me because we just don't have the funds to pay for another therapist. All of our coaches are volunteer based as well. And so for us, it's the funding. And the best way to help is through the website. There's a support Tailwinds Ranch tab and help there. Our social media might have it as well.
Yeah, I'll add to that. It took me 4 years of improving our fundraising to finally pay Michelle anything for her services.
So I've got paid for 3 months now. So that felt, kind of nice.
Yeah, tailwindsranch.org is the place where people can find us. So it's all one word, tailwindsranch.org. And there's links there that allow people to deposit or set up a recurring payment. We've had some great help from sponsors, a lot of friends and former military and college buddies that have really picked up the mantle. And we had a really great donation from one of the it's called the Treasure Chest. It's one of the base operating thrift stores down in the Norfolk area. And they realized how many, especially naval personnel, we were seeing and what they wanted to help. Really, anything helps. And then we've had some really good conversations lately about some local organizations who are starting to want to get involved. And, even from my favorite work day of cleaning the entire barn up, and they've started to offer help. Things like that. But let me also say this, besides fundraising stuff, if somebody thinks they know somebody, needs somebody, there's ways to contact us through the website to say, hey, maybe it's just about, I need to talk to you about services. There's a lot of organizations, when you see somebody that needs help and you don't know where to go or what to do next, then at least send us an email or give us a call. I've got some friends who do, recreational therapy through fly fishing groups. And sometimes, the untrained person runs into a veteran or first responder who needs more help than they can possibly give as a layman. And if they don't know then where to turn next, well, give us a call because Michelle, it's not just about our program. Michelle knows about all the other programs in the area and will often refer people out who are either too far or closer to somebody else, or maybe it doesn't match our mission very well. And there's other places that do it better than we do for other services.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a big thing too, is being able to get referrals elsewhere of like, oh, all right, look at this website to see, do this search engine, or there are these organizations in your area. We do that quite often when people are out of the area, but just are feeling that desperation of like, hey, I've got to do something. Everything's falling apart.
When we were so quote unquote at war, right, in Afghanistan, Iraq, all that sort of stuff, I think it was present in everyone's mind, right? Thank you for your service, and it was on the news, social media, and whatnot. And I know that there's smatterings of that today, but would you argue that despite the fact that we don't have major combat operations like we did have going on, hypothetically, say from 2001 till 2020s, that your mission will continue, right? That the need will always be there. And you guys mentioned earlier in the podcast that there was a Korean War veteran. So when you look at that from the 50s, I mean, that was 75 years ago, potentially. So not to say that you guys are looking for more business, quote unquote, but the services that you guys offer aren't going away anytime soon. And the need for your services aren't going anyway anytime soon. Would you guys agree with that?
Absolutely. And that's the thing is you think about, how we do reappraisals of, moral reappraisals, especially after the fall of Afghanistan. When you think, okay, I'm doing this for a purpose and there's bigger meaning in what I'm doing, then all of a sudden, the way that occurred, so many service members then started reevaluating what their history was. And we're still working through that with quite a few. Yeah, we're absolutely going to have the business. Even, and you're right. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have the business, right? And my job, I tell my clients, is my job is to work myself out of a job. My job is so that you don't need me anymore.
Yeah. I also like to remind people that most of the worst days of our lives are that's everyday life for a firefighter or police officer or medical professional. And so, and in the old days, those guys were told to suck it up and just go to work the next day. And I think there's a kind of a new generation that recognizes the long-term issues with doing that sort of thing, and then are encouraging people to come out and get the counseling they need and get back to full operational capability as quickly as they can.
Any final thoughts?
Just number one, thank you. And number two, just I guess I struggle to put it into words. Like Matt said, the world that you live in is so big and you're really on the front lines every day with that. And I think it's really important for people to realize that, you know, maybe like Matt says, maybe it's out of the news, maybe it's quote unquote in a different box for a lot of people right now, but these are things that are happening every day at your ranch. And I think it's important for all of us to have that compassion and understanding of, you know, not knowing what that other person might be going through. So thank you. That's been incredibly eye-opening.
I know you guys have seen this because, you know, we have lost some of our folks that we serve with. We've lost family members and stuff like that. And oftentimes we celebrate them after the fact, right? There's the big obituary, there's the celebration, there's that sort of stuff. And I don't want to wait to celebrate someone's achievements and wait to celebrate what someone meant to us and whatnot. And so I will say that I greatly appreciate Jeff and Michelle Weed, and I appreciate their friendship. I appreciate the mission that they serve. And I think that in some way, shape, or form, that there's people alive today because of your efforts. I just want to say thank you guys very much, just for being great friends, just for being who you are, and then just continuing to serve, right? Servant leadership isn't just something you do on a Friday afternoon because it's easy to do. It's hard, right? Leadership is a contact sport. And what you guys are doing is just leadership for society, and you're just making things better for people. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you guys
Yeah.
very much. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about this and to share it out there, because I think more people need to know about moral injury and that there are ways of addressing it and that life can get a little bit better.